Hello! It is time to wrap up the books that I read in the month of January, and I actually managed to finish 15 books in January this year, which is actually the exact same amount of books as I finished in January of last year as well, so that was interesting. But I'm going to run you through them, and the first one that I read was Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson, which I don't have my copy of yet. Hopefully it will arrive soon, but it's not here yet, so you'll have a picture of it on screen. And I really enjoyed this. It was a fun sort of new fairy tale with a quirky narrator who breaks the fourth wall, which is something I personally enjoy, and has a really sarcastic sense of humour, which is something I also really enjoy. The protagonist was really fun, the story was really engaging, and it was just a fun, whimsical read with some nice little Cosmere Easter eggs, which is always really fun. With Sanderson's books, especially his more recent books, he's definitely opening the Cosmere wide right now, so that's super fun. I actually spoke at length about Tress of the Emerald Sea over on Elle's channel, Elliot Brooks. She did a live stream for her patrons, but the video has also been posted, so if you want to hear myself and some other people discussing Tress in detail and in spoilers, then do feel free to head over and watch that. But that was my first read of the month, and if you haven't seen my 2023 plans, goals video thing, then you may not know that I am keeping track of my reads in my reading journal this year, and instead of noting the date that I finished the books, because I feel like that's not necessarily relevant anymore to me, I'm making a note of a word that I feel expresses my feelings about the book or describes the book in some way, and the word that I have for Tress is joy, because the book is just very, very joyful, and I had a joyful time reading it, so joy was the word for that one. The next book that I read was The Red Scholar's Wake by Alette de Bodard, and this is a sci-fi space opera romance type book. It follows a couple of different characters. One is named Redfish and the other Ricefish, sorry, and the other is Shitchsea. And I might as well just tell you straight off that my word for this book was confusing, because it really was very confusing. It's kind of an arranged marriage of convenience type situation between these two characters, but Ricefish is actually a spaceship. So they are an AI, I guess, and they have, what's the word, like a human appearing avatar that they use to interact with the other characters in the story, but it's just a little strange, to be honest. I found it quite odd, and it's slightly pirate-y, and there's lots of politics and battling for control of this sort of group of pirates, and there's just a lot going on in this very, very short book, and honestly I was quite confused for the vast majority of it. I really wanted to love it, and I liked the premise of it, but it was just very odd. And I think I've come to the realisation that space opera is just not really my thing. I do like politics, but I guess I just don't like them in this kind of setting. And I'm not hugely into pirate fantasy anyway, so this was pirates but in space, but also just there was so much going on and I was just confused. Next one I read was How High We Go in the Dark by Sequoia Nagamatsu, so another science fiction, this time a collection of short stories all on one theme, and that theme is a pandemic that has spread the globe, and you're following different people and their experiences with this pandemic over a period of hundreds, if not thousands, of years. Like most short story collections, some of them were hits and some of them were misses. For me, my overall feeling, and the word I put in my bullet journal for this one, was sad. It was very, very sad. In particular, the story that stood out the most to me and was the saddest. Oh, I've put the Dad's Just jacket on upside down. Hang on. So yes, the story that I found the most impactful, the saddest, the best, I thought, in the book was actually the second one, and it's called City of Laughter. I'm not going to tell you really anything else about what happens in this book because they're all short stories. Although the whole book is on the same theme, each short story is very individual and follows its own kind of arc, so I can't really tell you anything about them without spoiling them, and I don't want to do that because I think it would take away from the impact. I'm glad that I read this book. It was very sad or melancholy. I didn't love all of the short stories, but I did enjoy the vast majority of them, and I enjoyed my time reading this book. Kind of. It's weird to say you enjoyed something that made you sad, but you know what I mean. Next, I read A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. What was my word for this? My word for this was gothic, and actually that is exactly what this book is. It's very, very gothic. If you don't know what it's about, it is essentially, it's about Dracula's wives. It's the story of, well, partners, let's say partners, Dracula's partners, and the relationship that they have with him, the relationship that they have with each other, the lives that they lead, and there really isn't any other way I can think of to describe it other than gothic. I have read Dracula, and it really did remind me of the vibe of Dracula. It's quite slow, not in that nothing is happening, but just it gives off that sort of slow feeling, and I suppose that makes sense because the passage of time in this is over a very long period of time, because we're talking vampires here, right? So they're living for hundreds and hundreds of years, and so you have that kind of slow progression of them, the partners coming to the realization that, you know, Dracula isn't such a great guy, you know? So again, I don't want to say too much about this, although if you've read any other stories about Dracula's wives, then you'll kind of know where this is going. I thought that it was well done. I really liked the relationship between Dracula's partners with each other rather than with him, and I'm pleased that I read this one. It was a good time. Again, good time doesn't really work in this context, but you know what I mean. Next, I read a few books that I don't have physical copies of, so I will just pop a picture up for you and talk to you about them. The next one was Dating Dr. Dill by Nisha Sharma, and I really, really enjoyed this. I've heard very mixed things about this book. Some people seem to really like it and other people don't. The word that I have to describe this one is aunties. So when I was reading this book, I came to the realization that I'm Portuguese, right? I've read books that, like the Aunties series, right? So Dialé for Aunties, those books I've read. So those are East Asian inspired books. Then I've also read sort of Latina inspired books, and all of us, Latinas, East Asians, and apparently also West Asians, have this interesting relationship with aunties, and I absolutely love it. The aunties in this one were really funny and sort of brought that comic relief. The relationship between the protagonist and the hero was really good fun. I really bought into the relationship. It was a nice quick read and I really enjoyed myself. I thought it was really good fun, and it's one that I would personally recommend. I know that not everybody has loved it, but I think it's worth giving a go. Next, I'm going to talk about 3 books all in one, because these are the last 3 books in a series of 6 books. So this was the first series that I finished off in the year of 2023. So that's 1 ticked off my list of 23 and 23. And this was books 4, 5 and 6 of the Alcatraz series by Brandon Sanderson. So it was Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians, The Shattered Lens, The Dark Talent, and Bastille versus the Evil Librarians. So for book 5 I wrote the word fun. For book 4 I wrote the word fun. For book 5 I wrote the word unexpected, and book 6 I wrote girl power, because Bastille versus the evil librarians. And I really enjoyed book 6. I think that once again this was a collaboration between Brandon Sanderson and Janci Patterson, and I feel like their humour works really well together, and I really enjoyed that element of it. I think the reason I found book 5 so unexpected was mostly because of the ending, which of course I can't tell you about, but I just found that it didn't really go the way that I was expecting it to go. And I can't even really tell you why, because if I tell you why, that would be a spoiler. So I find it really, really difficult to speak about sequels, and I particularly find it difficult to speak about sequels that are so late in the series, if not finishing the series, because I'm just so conscious of not wanting to give too much away. But I enjoyed my time with this series. I think that there is a little bit of a lull in the middle of the series. It's quite a long one, so I suspect that that's pretty natural that that would happen, and I think that the fact that there was such a gap between book 5 and 6 just speaks to the fact that Sando lost touch with the series a little bit towards the end there, and it kind of does tell. Again, this is a middle grade series though, so I think they've both Brandon Sanderson and Janci Patterson have a really good bead on what kids will find funny, and I thought it was funny, and I think kids would find it funny as well. It's very break the fourth wall kind of narrative. In terms of humour, it's actually really similar to Tress of the Emerald Sea. So if you've read Tress and you want more like that from Sanderson, I'd actually recommend this series, because the tone in Tress is very different to any of his other Cosmere works, but actually it's pretty similar to the Alcatraz series and even the last book, Bastille, which was written predominantly by Janci. So I really enjoyed my time reading this series. I'm glad that I read it. I would recommend it. I think expect a little bit of a dip in terms of the later books in the series, but Bastille picks it back up again, and I really enjoyed how the series ended. Next up, I read Hunt the Stars by Jessie Mihalik, and this one, I really enjoyed this one. So this is a sci-fi kind of, it's set in space and it has kind of a sci-fi type plot line, but it reads very contemporary. It really reminds me of the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers, which is great because I love that series. So it's quite slice of life, it's quite introspective, it's quite, you know, character focused and focused on the relationship between the characters with each other and with themselves. This one follows, I need to check because I'm actually reading the sequel right now and I don't want to give you the wrong information. So we follow Octavia, or Tavi Zarola, who is a ship's captain, and she gets hired to do a job for, what are they called? The Valovs. So Torrin Fletcher hires her to help him hunt down something that has been taken, and the Valovs were the opposition to Tavi and her crew and the humans in a recent galactic war, and that there is peace now, but they don't necessarily trust each other, and it's predominantly, I would say, a romance, and I just loved it. It was so sweet and I really enjoyed myself reading this one. The word that I wrote in my journal for it was cute, and I think it really is that. I didn't realise when I picked it up that it was the first in a series. The second book is already out, the third book is coming out later this year, and in the effort to really continue with series, I have picked up the second one already. I'm not quite binging it, but that's because not all of the books are out yet, but I have picked up the second one, and in any event they're kind of companion-y type books because the second book follows a different character, so on the same spaceship. So definitely recommend this. It was super fun. Next up, not a book that you could accuse of being fun, was The Golden Fool by Robin Hobb. I have buddy read this with Joanna from the channel Joanna Sosa, and this is the second book in the Tawny Man trilogy, which is the third series in the Realm of the Elderlings series by Robin Hobb. I therefore cannot tell you very much about this one, but I can say that my word for this was frustrating, because some of the choices that the characters were making throughout the course of this story were driving me up a wall. If you've read any of the realm of the Elderlings, you can probably guess who was irritating me in this one. I really enjoyed myself. I really liked the book, but there were some characters that I really just wanted to grab and give a good shake at various points throughout this read. So definitely recommend it. Definitely enjoyed it. Definitely want to just some of the characters in here, but I had a good time reading it. Next up, I read Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett, sorry. And this one is actually the first book in a series also, which I also did not realise until Abby from the channel Abby Salter let me know, and then I was like, oh damn, I'm starting another series. But oh well, this one is, my word for it was whimsy, and it is very whimsical. So it follows, as the name might suggest, Emily Wilde, who, what's the word that they use for it? I can't find it. Anyway, she's an expert on the fae, on fairies, and in this story we aren't really focused just on the high fae, which is what most fae stories focus on, right? We're not really focused on those. We are focused on all different kinds of fairies. So we have changelings, we have sprites, we have all that kind of thing, and essentially Emily Wilde is in the far north to research the types of fairies that live in this snowy landscape so that she can write her encyclopedia, which she is in the process of. And then her friend, loosely used, colleague, loosely used, Wendell, turns up, and she isn't particularly pleased to see him at first, but he's there to help her with her investigations, and they could not be more different in terms of personalities. She is massively an introvert and he is massively an extrovert, so they complement each other quite well, even if they slightly frustrate each other. This was really, really good fun. It's quite short actually, and as I said, it's the first in a series. I don't know how long the series is going to be, but the sequel, the name, has already been announced. I think it's Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands, if I remember correctly. I will try and remember to write on screen if I got that wrong. And I enjoyed this one. It was very whimsical. I didn't love it quite as much as I was hoping that I would. I didn't become obsessed with it, but I did really, really enjoy myself, and I do look forward to continuing with the rest of the series and continuing to follow these characters because they are really, really good fun. Next, I decided to dive into a reread of The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy by Megan Bannon. The reason I wanted to reread this is because I think that it's my favourite book from 2022, but I wanted to check, and having reread it I can confirm this is my favourite book from 2022. I know I haven't done a favourites video, but honestly I think I was having a really hard time, one, pinning down what my favourites are, and two, wanting to look back on 2022. So I don't honestly know if I will do that video, and it feels a little bit redundant now that it's February. You let me know what you think, but I can confirm that this is my favourite book from 2022. I really, really enjoyed it when I read it last year. I really, really enjoyed it when I reread it this month, or last month technically, and my word for it was love, because I just absolutely love this story. It follows two characters, Heart and Mercy. Mercy is an undertaker essentially, and Heart is a warrior, soldier, guard type person who has to kill these monster type things, and the monsters kind of invade the bodies of the dearly departed, as it were. So once he has, you know, exorcised them, I guess, he has to bring them to an undertaker to be looked after, and Mercy is one said undertaker, and they really do not get along, and so they both are, you know, struggling with their own personal things that are going on in their lives, and they don't get on with each other, and then they become pen pals. They don't realise that they are each other's pen pal. It's just so adorable. I loved the story. I love the relationship between Heart and Mercy. I love the plot. I just think everything about this book is great, and I highly recommend it. Next up, we have a book for which my word was bizarre, because it really is, and that is Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake, which again is quite a short book. Quite a lot of these quite short, which is probably why I managed to read so many of them in January. But this one is just really strange, and I don't even know what to tell you about it. It follows two characters and their relationship with each other, their personalities, their relationship with other people. Some of the scenes are very odd. There's some slightly sexual content, but not kind of in a sexy way. It's kind of weird, but it's not, there's no essay as far as I can recall. I think I would have remembered that because it's something that usually sticks out to me. So there isn't anything like that, but it is just a little bit odd, and it's one of those situations where the characters are both terrible and perfect for each other, you know, as in terrible for each other and perfect for each other. So it's very dysfunctional, both in terms of the content and the relationship. It's just a very strange book, and I'm glad I read it. I enjoyed myself, but it's really weird. So I guess that's kind of my note to go into it. Just know that because I didn't know it was going to be so weird, and I started reading it and I was like, this is really weird. So yeah, just bear that in mind, I guess. Then Joanna and I decided to finish off the Tawny Man trilogy by reading Fool's Fate, and my word for this one was bittersweet. So again, this is a last book in a series. Well, kind of a series. Last book in a trilogy. Not the last book in a series, although originally it was supposed to be the last book in the Realm of the Elderlings as well, which it does read that way, and then she later decided to write the Rainworld Chronicles and the Fitz and the Fool trilogy, which, knowing that, did impact upon how my experience with reading this was, and actually I'm really glad that I read this in 2023 and not in, when did this come out? 2008 when this came out. Really, really glad I didn't read it then. How do I talk about this book without being spoilery? I don't really know. I liked it. There were elements about it that I did not love. There were elements about it that I wanted to be explored more, so I'm hoping that means that they'll be explored in the later books. There were things that happened that I really wish hadn't happened or had happened differently, but not in the perspective of I didn't like the way that it was written, just in the perspective of I wanted different things for the characters. So I'm going to keep it that vague because I really struggle to talk about sequels, and especially last books in trilogies. I enjoyed this. That's all I'll say. And then the last book that I finished in the month of January was Heart of the Sun Warrior by Su Lin Tan. So this was the third series that I finished in the month of January. So I finished the Alcatraz series, I finished the Tawny Man trilogy, and then I finished the Celestial Kingdoms duology by reading this one, which my word was actually 2 words for this one, and it was too fast. I think what I have come to realise probably over the last year or so, maybe even the last 18 months, is I used to think that I liked fast-paced books best, but actually I don't think I do. I think I actually like slow-paced books better. I just want to read them quickly. So I found this was just too fast for me. Again, I can't tell you much about this book because it's a sequel, but I will say that I just didn't feel like we had enough time with the events that were happening. You know, something would happen and the characters barely had any time to react to that thing before we were on to the next climactic element, the next scene, the next big thing that was going on. And I really just wanted to pause and breathe for a minute and sit with our feelings a little bit, and we just did not ever have the opportunity to do that until the very end when things were wrapping up, by which point for me it was kind of a little bit too late because I disconnected from the characters really by then, because I just wasn't getting to know them, because I was never seeing them experience any of what they were going through. I was just seeing them go through it and then move on to going through the next thing, which as a character driven reader doesn't really work for me. If you're a plot driven reader, I think you'd really like this. And I think casting my mind back to book 1, my complaint for that one was probably the same. So if you love plot, if you're a plot driven reader, then I think this duology would be great for you. If you are a fan of world building, I also think that this duology would be really great for you. But if you're a character driven reader, I don't think it's going to hit quite as well as some other books would, because of how quickly we move through the plot and we don't really sit with the characters and spend time getting to know them. So unfortunately this didn't quite hit perfectly for me. I am glad that I read it. I'm glad that I finished this duology. I'm glad that I got to see where all the characters ended up. But I just wish that the author had taken out a few elements and really just spent some more time dealing with what was happening to her characters. So that was my final read in the month of January. I think on the whole I had a pretty good reading month. You'll have to let me know what you read in January, and if you read any of these either in January or previously, what you thought of them. And that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks. Bye.